You're listening to Back to the Roots podcast with Mike Klein, and along with Brian Wood. Today we are sitting down with John Miller Jr. in Fresno, Ohio. John is a produce grower and a direct marketer. So we want to talk about organic produce. So thank you for joining us today.
A little bit of an introduction where I come from and what we've been doing. I grew up on a dairy farm. I have six brothers and 4 sisters. Growing up on the dairy farm, I thought I would end up being a dairy farmer, but the price of land dictated I do otherwise. So we had this opportunity when I was young, married. My father-in-law bought this place, and we had the opportunity to move to it. And currently we have 76 acres. There's about 30 acres tillable. And of that amount, we do about 12 to 15 acres vegetables in a year. It's been a long road where we're at now. And when we started, the first year we did 2 acres of produce. It was all marketed through Greenfield Farms Co-op. And we still market largely through them, but we supply CSA in Columbus, Ohio, and we have a retail roadside stand also. So that's where we come from. The first year, 2 acres. The farm we moved to was not being farmed for probably 20 years prior to us arriving. So it was weeds and brush, and we had to get the fields cleared. We had to add fertilizers. So it was a certified organic farm not certified, but it was an organic farm by neglect. But we were able to get it certified right away and start producing. So today we're where we want to be on acreage. We're constantly tweaking our program to be more efficient. We do not have any children ourselves, so we hire in seasonal help, 6 to 10 employees per summer. So.
Okay. And as we sit here in the living room, we look out the window and we still see kale out there. So do you do kale in the fall?
Yes, we do a lot of kale. The first planting of kale we put out is in early April, and we'll start picking kale about the last week in May. And that's one of our biggest sellers that we raise right now. We grow about 3 acres per year. We put out 2 acres in the spring, and we start harvesting that in late May, and that goes all through summer into the fall. And then about July, we come back with a second planting, and that comes through about late August. And so we continue to harvest that until it varies on the fall, but we have harvested kale for the wholesale market in November already. Not this year, but other years we have. And matter of fact, we just ate kale the other day out of the field. Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Because we went from summer to winter and the end of October. So it was probably a little bit of a weird fall for the produce guys as well as for the dairy guys.
It was really a struggle. Especially September, put a real wrench into some late crops. We had a late planting of zucchini. They were just starting to come on strong. And then we had that hurricane. I forget the name of it, but I do remember going out in the field, and there was flowers open that were full of water. And obviously bees don't dive, so we lost a lot. That planting should have made us maybe 800 boxes, and we ended up with 150 or so.
Oh, wow.
So fall was definitely a downside for this year, but we had a good year otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So what other crops are you growing on this farm?
The big crops we grow are tomatoes. Have been a mainstay all these years, and this past year there was 2 acres of those. And if you're not familiar with a tomato, it's there's a lot of labor involved, especially in peak season. We want to come back down on those numbers a little bit, but we do still like to raise them. We also grow about 3 acres of green zucchini per year. We space those out in 3 different plantings. The first one starts we plant them in late April. We cover with row cover to hit the early market. They'll be ready 1st of June, and then we plant 2 more plantings later on. That should keep us in zucchini till frost, usually about. And then we also grow a lot of green peppers. And a new crop for us that we've started a couple of years ago, and we've been growing that. We're only at maybe half an acre to 3/4 acre, and that's rainbow Swiss chard. But there's a pretty good wholesale market for that also. And then we fill in with a little bit of fall squash. We do some grape tomatoes, mixed colors, and straight reds. And then there's niche items we grow only for the retail, like hot peppers and those little yummy mixed peppers, a little bit of lettuce, just a variety of small things that it's not what pays the farm, but it might pay the grocery bills.
You don't do any sweet corn?
We don't do any sweet corn at all. We used to. But for us, being a certified organic operation, using untreated seed set us back from every other retail produce market in the area. And by the time we had corn, everybody had corn. And our farm is not big enough to dedicate 5 acres of corn or whatever. And I never liked to pick it. I always got too wet picking it, so I decided I'll let other people take care of that.
And as far as going organic, when you moved here, you said it was ready to be certified if you wanted it to be. Did you move here wanting to do organic, or was that something that the opportunity was there and you decided to take advantage of that?
The opportunity was here. That was the plan when we arrived. If I would have known what we're going through, what's going to happen, I probably wouldn't have attempted it. But we were young. We were in our lower 20s, and we wanted to do this. And so, yes, that was the plan from the get-go. But I was thinking of growing 2 acres of produce and being sustained, and I was in for a surprise. And I've had to take some off-farm jobs over the winters to be able to survive. Especially the first 4 or 5 years were tough.
When you say what you went through, and you may not have made the same decision, you mean just the growth part, or what are you referring to there?
What I'm saying, what I went through is I grew up on the dairy farm under Dad's arm, so I was not responsible for paying the bills. I was only responsible for milking the cows and hauling the manure. And that can be hard, but it's easy. I mean, in reality, you just put some labor to it. And coming here, I came, the first couple of years we were married, I was doing construction work. And that's a guaranteed paycheck for every hour you work, regardless if you produce well for your boss or not. And so coming on the farm, I had to learn a lot of things. I had to learn how to manage my money, and then all of a sudden I was, instead of thinking how many hours do I work to earn this, I was thinking how many boxes of zucchini do I need to produce to earn this. And at the time the farm was low fertility, and those boxes didn't come easy. So it was a learning curve from learning how I didn't have any background in the produce world. So I had to learn that. I had to learn how to manage the weeds, the cover crops, the fertility. I was new to most of, even if I grew up on a farm. And it was just that learning curve. It was steep. But it's about 9 years now, and I'm glad we're doing what we're doing. I've never had a job that I had as much satisfaction. At the end of the day, we produce food for people to consume, and we're trying to produce nutrient-dense food, not just any kind of food. And that's a satisfaction that goes over a big paycheck. But in reality, there has to be a paycheck or you're not going to survive. So that's what I was referring to.
Sure. And, you mentioned growing up on a dairy farm. Was that home farm organic?
The home farm is an organic farm right now. But at the time I was a boy, there were very few dairy farm any kind of organic farm. So it transitioned. I think it was an organic farm the time I moved to this farm, but it was never in my dad's time.
So fertility wise and building, like you mentioned, you were brand new to the whole building fertility and cover cropping and doing that kind of thing. And you didn't have the background on the home farm. What have you done in order to get that fertility to where it is? It's always a work in progress. That's every farm. But what have you done so far to try and build that up?
Well, I mean, if you go back, like what we did at home was spread lime and haul manure. And it was a fine Wayne County farm with maybe 3 foot of topsoil. And here, this is a different ballgame. The topsoil might only be 6 to 10 inches deep. And we started taking soil samples. And I know some guys say that's just a piece of paper. And it may be so. They're not 100%, but it's a roadmap to what is there. And the first soil samples we pulled, we had calcium level 30-40%, where we're looking for 70. And it was just phosphorus was way low. And I was connected, we market through the Greenfield Farms Co-op, and they also do custom blending on fertilizer. So I did whatever they recommended. And then when at the end of the season, when the vegetables were over with, we almost always seeded in rye cover crop, or if we could get in earlier, we'd use radishes, peas, all kinds of cover crops we've been doing. So that's a big thing. And we've spread some chicken litter also. And if I put a cover crop in the fall, get it started, add some chicken litter in the fall, in the growing season yet, that's tremendous results the following year. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, he's got 3 brothers that ship milk to Organic Valley.
Okay. Yep.
So, and your brother Paul was the one that took the home farm organic, right?
That's correct.
And then
Yep.
Paul moved, and your brother Michael moved home in this year.
Yep. So there's a lot of organic going on in the family. It's 3 brothers, and then also 2 brother-in-laws that are on the grass-only milk. So that's a conversation.
Who's that?
Norman Miller, he's close to Apple Creek.
Oh,
and
Norman
then,
J. on Criswell.
Yes.
He's a brother-in-law.
Yes.
I see.
And then also Reuben Miller, he's in Gilbert, New York now.
Oh,
He used to be close to Berlin.
gotcha.
Yep.
I did not realize they were brother-in-laws.
Yep.
But so I know a lot of your family.
You do.
So I assume at all the family gatherings, there's a lot of talk about organic fertility and
We
what
can
can be.
talk- We can talk about farming, that's for sure.
Yeah.
When you talk to your brothers who are dairy, I mean, building soil is building soil. There's probably some practices that they do and that you do that you can share information. But when you look at produce, it is so intensive per acre compared to raising hay. So you probably look at your soil samples a little bit different than your dairy farmer who's got lots of manure.
Exactly. I would not. What I do is, I don't think a dairy farmer could be very profitable doing what I do, because I spend a lot of money per acre. But what I'm looking to do is, I want to grow 8 to up to 20,000 an acre, depending the crop. So in my mind, if I have to spend $1,000 to get that accomplished, I can do it. Where a dairy farmer, you make hay, you put out corn, you're not getting that kind of yield back. So I always tell my dairy farmer friends, spread some manure, spread some lime, plow in some hay or whatever. That's a good start. But for me, it doesn't make sense not to do all the little things because of what we're trying to produce.
But when you look at the gross that you're trying to get per acre, look at the nutrients that you're taking off per acre versus 5 ton of hay per acre. So you're also draining the soil at a much higher rate, so you have no choice but to put more back on.
That's
versus a dairy or a crop farmer.
That's right. And with all that, with all the nutrients we use, the one thing that's an absolute must for survival on a large scale produce operation, you have to have water. You have to be irrigating, wet or dry or whatever. You have to be doing that. You need to control that moisture day to day to really get those yields what you're looking for.
And yours would all be irrigated?
Pretty much. We have done like fall squash without, if we had a dry summer and we were running low on water, but we're trying to get it where everything will be watered. And we always, like the tomatoes, the peppers, we make sure we have water for that.
Do you have any problems with the blight in the tomato plants?
Absolutely. That's been a game changer for us. The first couple of years we grew tomatoes. I didn't really know what blight was. I just knew they died, and I was innocent. I was new to the program, but I started reading some literature, and I found out what it is. I mean, early blight, late blight, whatever. Early blight is the big one for us, to get that before it's too bad. And so we take steps to prevent that. I've read an article, maybe 6 years ago, on trimming tomatoes, taking off the bottom leaves, taking off the suckers, and then putting down a mulch between the rows. So some people say if with the rain, the backsplash on the plant can get it started. So we've been doing things like that, and we put in a lot more labor, and it's been worth it. Our tomatoes went from yielding 6 to 8 pounds a plant. This year was a bad year, and we had 11 pounds. Last year was the best year ever. It was almost 20 pounds, number one tomatoes per plant. So
wow.
That's a big difference.
And you're able to control the blight pretty good?
Pretty good. That's one step of the program, what I talked about. Another step is we have to keep on them with some kind of copper about once a week.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep.
Because I have a friend who foliar sprayed his tomatoes once a week. Every Saturday morning he foliar sprayed his tomatoes, and the last 3 years he's had zero blight.
I see. Do you know what he was spraying with?
It was the AEA Garden Blend, or I think. And I don't know what's in that.
I haven't used those products. So
I had a jug at home, and I used it, and evidently not enough because our tomatoes still got it.
Uh-huh.
Do you rotate?
Yes, we stay away 3 years from any. We separate our crops into 3 different families, and that would be like kale and cabbage, would be the brassicas, all kinds of squash, the zucchini, yellow squash, cucumbers, fall squash, whatever's in that lineup. Those are the cucurbits, and then the nightshade family of eggplant, peppers, tomatoes are the others. So we switch around. We try and stay away 3 years before coming back, especially into tomatoes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think growing produce with every crop being so intense, the learning curve from that to being a crop farmer has to be night and day, because every single crop is so different.
Yes, it is. It is. It's become easier over the years, but just with the experience. But you almost have to specialize in what you're doing to be able to really get out the yields and the quality at the same time. And thinking about dairy farming, that looks easy to me, but right now where we're at, I wouldn't trade. We have intense summers. We don't go camping and fishing a lot. It's basically 6 days a week for all we can do. But then we have an off season. Mm-hmm. This time of the year, we catch up on things. We get rested up. And by spring, we'll be ready to go again. Where my brothers, they still need to stand up at 4:30 in the morning to get the cows milked. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. What other disease issues do you see besides blight, and what are you doing for them?
We, like peppers, we don't see a lot in peppers. Zucchini, there's different diseases in those. One very common one is powdery mildew, and we expect to see that after a couple weeks of harvesting. And you can also well, fertility is the number one line of defense of any disease. And then if you want to add to that, you add, keeping a copper on there or something that works similar to peroxide. There's sprays out there. One's called Oxidate. It has the same thing. You put it on and it basically cooks off the bacteria. But so those are things you can do. But for me, I would say tomatoes and blight are my worst enemies. The others, like the powdery mildews, they come with every season, but I don't worry about them much usually, especially the early planting zucchini. By the time it comes, they're getting tired anyway, and it's time to go. There was another one, the late zucchini this year. It's what you call gummy stem blight. And that comes with wet, humid weather, which we had plenty of that. And it can also be a rotation problem. So that's one of the things that we want to do better. We just added some land last winter. And it was also brush land and so forth, but we put some in cover crops this year. And so we want to be able to rotate more and have some. Most of the fields I've been using have been in produce every year. They had a cover crop over winter and back in produce next year. So now we're looking at maybe putting some fields into permanent cover crops for 2-3 years and then coming back. So we're kind of excited about that.
Would you just mow the cover crops and let it all go back in?
That would be my plan.
Okay, so basically leaving it fallow for a couple of years.
Yes. I would like to make hay, but it's prohibitive for me to buy $40,000 worth of hay equipment for 10 acres. And custom farming in this area is, I could mow it and rake it, but getting a guy in the bale, you just can't find him. So I said, well, we'll just be a small farm and just leave it fallow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can probably buy a lot of hay for $40,000.
I think we can get by a couple years, yes. 4 or 5 horses don't eat that much. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Now,
go ahead, Brian.
Well, I just was going to say, are you, the crops that you're growing, are they did you choose your crops based on profitability, or did you have your crops chosen for you, but were you making them for the markets that were looking for it? Or is it a combination of both? You were able to develop the most profitable crops for the markets that you're providing for?
There's a couple factors in that. What we do, like the co-op we grow for, is every farmer hands in a projection about this time of the year of what he's planning to grow and how many acres of each and all that. They put those numbers together, and then they can see what's too much, what's not enough. And usually a lot of the change goes to the new farmers. The older farmers can kind of keep doing what they do. And that's my choice. We've learned what's more profitable, but it's not only that, but also bringing in hired help at the beginning of the season and keeping them till the end of the season. That's hard to have the right amount of crops, so there's work steady through the season. So that's where kale and tomatoes go together so well. The kale's early, and then when it gets really hot and a lot of tomatoes are around, the kale really slows down. And then we just try and fill in that window with whatever seems to work well. And that's kind of the program we have right now is 3 acres of kale, 3 acres of zucchini, anywhere from 1 acre to 2 acres of tomatoes. And then this year we want to put out 3 acres of peppers also. And then we used to do a little bit of eggplant, but that market's been a lot harder to please the past couple of years, so we decided we'll go away from that and focus on peppers more.
Do you have like an area where you try different vegetables just small scale to see if this is something you might want to do because you heard that there's an emerging market or something like that? Do you play around with some different stuff?
Yes, we do. What we normally do, we designate a plot for the retail. And then if there's something that's bothering me that I might be missing the market on, I'll put out a couple plants or maybe 20 and just watch them, see what happens, see what pests come up, see what disease, see how long they last, and then make a decision off of that. Will we able to do that on a larger scale? And that's what happened, like this Rainbow Swiss chart. I heard about it. We planted a couple plants one year. I saw there's potential here, and then we stepped it up to a whole row in a field the next year, and I did the math on that, and it was good. And so we stepped it up these past 2 years to about half an acre. And that's actually a very profitable crop. We can get up to $20,000 worth off a half an acre. And that started very small. And I think that's same with kale. We didn't know what kale was when we started growing produce. I didn't know how it looked. I didn't know how it tasted. And I didn't have a desire to taste it either. But we started that small and got to the right variety, and now it's a big crop for us. So definitely things we're looking at. There was a time we did some Hungarian wax peppers, but the market wanted those individually stickered, and that was a career, so we got rid of that one. This past year, I thought we have some markets going south to Florida and so forth, so I was thinking about okra, and we planted some this year, and that's still a trial, and I'm not sure. Right now, if I would have to say, I would say that's not going to happen. But yes, definitely, there's always things to try, and this time of the year, looking at the catalogs, you think you can raise about anything, but there's a reality check in the spring.
Yep.
Do you do any root crops?
We do a little bit of red beets, and red beets have become very popular. The co-op is selling them now in bunches and also in bags without the tops. And this past year, we couldn't grow enough for our retail. So that is one of the items that this coming year we have plans to just put out enough that nobody's going to go hungry for red beets. And then we have the beauty of selling to the co-op and the retail, so it's not a one market only. And then also my CSA would buy if we had some. So that's the crop we do in root crops, and we would like to step that up a little bit. We also do about 5,000 onions a year, candy onions, most of them, sometimes a little bit of red. So yeah, that's kind of the basics on root crops. We have tried garlic, and we sell some garlic, but we just started buying that from another grower. It's really hard to grow 50 different vegetables and do it right. So we try and do right what we can do right, and then buy in what we need to fill in the blanks.
Because I've noticed when you want to buy local organic vegetables, root crops are actually hard to find. What is the reason? Is it really hard to raise root crops, or is the money not there?
For the most part, the money's not there. Like carrots are a prime example. We don't grow carrots. And carrots a crop that you can harvest mechanically a lot. So, and potatoes is another one. And that's why the money's not there. For me to grow potatoes, I would like to charge 75 cents a pound. And who wants to pay that locally? I mean, it's just, that's part of the thing. If it's possible to harvest mechanically, usually it's not a good option for small farmers like us.
That makes sense. Because I've watched videos of the carrot harvester. Yeah, it's significantly faster than the fork out in the field, I noticed.
Definitely.
It's really, really neat to see, but I often wondered why the root crops, and that totally makes sense.
Yep.
The mechanical harvesting you can't compete.
You cannot compete. That's right. Another root crop we did a couple years when we still were willing to work really hard was sweet potatoes. And at one time we did about an acre of those. And we had it almost figured out. We would plant them in our plastic, and when it came time to harvest, just before frost, we would clip off the vines, remove the plastic, and then go in sideways with a skid steer. And one person would have a hold at the top of the plant, and then would probably have a hold of two plants, and then the skid steer driver would have forks, manure forks on it, and go down and wiggle a little bit, and they'd come right out, all of them. And we did that for a while, but that was, the market started wanting them all uniform size and all that, and ours were, and deer love sweet potatoes. They love the plant, and mice love the potatoes. So that's 2 strikes already. And if the market cracks on you, you know, that's strike 3. So, yep.
Where does root crops fit into the rotation? Like you said, the nightshades and does that fit in? Do you have to maneuver your rotation if you were to grow to do that? Or do they fit in nicely?
Actually, I'm not that familiar what exact family that would be. I do know, like the Swiss chard, it actually almost looks like a beet. So that would be in the same family, but I'm not sure what disease carryover you would have on that. Something that happened on our farm is one day one of the girls that worked here was taking care of the retail, and somebody wanted red beets, and she ducked some Swiss chard for them. That she got confused. So that's how closely those two resemble each other.
Can you eat the bulb of a Swiss chard?
I haven't tried yet, but maybe we should try that once.
That's all right.
There you go, new market opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah, you could harvest all the Swiss chard up top and then sell the bulb yet.
Yes, we might have to try that.
Because I love red beets. Oh my, do I love red beets.
Okay, well, that makes sense that we sell so many, because depending on me, it really wouldn't take a whole lot.
No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, as far as the CSAs and the local markets, and have you seen anything as far as these meal delivery companies that you know, they process, or you know, like Blue Apron and Green Chef and some of these companies that will take ready-made meals, or not entirely made meals, but they'll take produce and add it to the box. Have you seen anything like that as far as expanding opportunities, or does Greenfield work with stuff like that?
Greenfield does not do a lot with that. Greenfield Farms is mostly wholesale, like the big chain stores, wholesale to people like that. Now, my CSA that I supply out of Columbus, he told me that the CSA model is dead and gone as we knew it. But he said the new thing, like you were saying, home delivery, definitely. So I'm not sure where this is all going to go. The CSA manager is an older guy, and he remembers when milk was delivered at home, and he sees this all coming back. So is it a trend that's going to last 2 years, or is it here to stay? How long does it take people to want to get out to shop again? We don't know.
Yeah, because right now, Nature's Warehouse, Healthy Living Nature's Warehouse, you can order a monthly box of vegetables or whatever it is delivered to your house. And you see those little vans all over this area, and in northern Indiana I saw them as well. But right now the trend is having everything delivered to your house. And the amount of boxes that Blue Apron and those ship out is unbelievable. So I think we're going to see growth in that, even in the Amish community, because of Healthy Living and their home delivery service. So I think that's going to be a market that's going to be growing for a while, until people get tired of buying off of their phone.
I agree, and like that Healthy Living, they're pretty good. I mean, they deliver to us. And for us, I'm not even sure. I think there's a free delivery if you order a certain amount of dollars. And for us, that's cheaper than getting a driver and going somewhere. So somebody definitely understands the needs that people want right now.
Well, it's all about convenience.
Yes, it is.
But I still remember that I think it was every Thursday morning the Smith Dairy truck would stop at our house and deliver milk or cottage cheese or orange juice, whatever we wanted. I still remember that as a little kid. So I think it's just kind of funny how things come back around where, that was so dumb. Everybody wanted to go to the store and buy stuff. Now all of a sudden, having them bring it out is pretty nice.
Yes. And that's my question, watching this whole thing play out, is it here for 10 years or is it here for 2? And that's what time will tell, I guess.
Well, I think, as far as like the CSAs and the farmers markets, and that had a huge, comeback in over the last 10, 15 years. We've seen growth in both of those sides of things, but now it's evolved into the Green Chef, and who knows where it's going to go from here. And I guess that's part of the question. Like, as far as your CSA, did you seek that person out, or did they come to you looking for it? And then what opportunities are you seeing coming your way in the future in order to be able to evolve with the change in the markets?
Like the CSA model we supplied, that evolved over a couple of years of a contact person. I had a number and I contacted him, and we might have talked for a year before the first sale was made, but that's a relationship that has grown. And I leave the trends to him. What I want to be for him is his supplier. If he calls me and says I need 1,500 pieces of zucchini next week, I say we're willing. Like, we actually count them for him, so he has the exact amount for his box, and that has really worked well for us. What I really see as an opportunity for us personally is try and grow the retail market, and we're not in a prime location at all, but to become a destination for people to stop and buy their fresh produce, see where it was grown. I think people are more conscious of the organic than they were. In this area in particular, it's local and organic have the same meaning to some people, and that's kind of what I see changing. Growing local does not mean there was no chemicals used, and as people become more educated, they will seek out more organic, and that's what I'm hoping to be here for and be ready. And for me, that's just staying ahead of the curve. I think we should go to paper bags instead of plastic bags and things like that. Now on the wholesale market, as far as like the co-op, that's quality rules, that one. So if we can produce quality, I'm sure we'll keep producing new items as we go forward, but quality is really what is giving us phone calls in that area.
Do you know what you said retail stores? Is that Whole Foods, Kroger's? Is it? Do you know? Is it pretty far reaching? It doesn't really. If they're asking for it, they're there to try and provide it, or are there certain types of stores that they're providing for?
Probably our biggest customer was the Crossett Company, and they supplied the Kroger stores. But as of right now, Kroger's wants to deal directly with Greenfield Farms, so the coming season they will be buying directly, and that's been the biggest business of the co-op. And then there's also Whole Foods is some, Heinen's in Cleveland is some, and then we have trucks going to Florida. We've been in and out of the Publix the past couple of years. That's, I think, 1,100 store chain, and they're big, so it's a little harder to stay connected with them. So those are some of the places we go, and some of the buyers are people that only repack for places like Publix. They buy bulk from the co-op and repackage it, 5 pieces in a tray and stuff like that. And that things we've talked about, could we bring that to the farm level and sell it that way? But at this point, it's it's not something we're pursuing.
Now, what about pricing on your, whether it's wholesale or retail? One of the things that we deal with, primarily working with dairy, but we're seeing it, dairy, crops, chickens. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of trying to cut costs, trying to become more efficient because things are so tight right now. Prices have come down quite significantly. And one thing that I don't think either Mike or I are fully aware of is, how if there are price pressures in the organic produce market. Has there been a lot of growers that have tried to get in and that have flooded a market, or does it depend on the crop? And where is that whole market side of things?
For us, we've been with this for 9 years, and I can definitely say the prices did not go up. They have come down, especially some crops. In the meantime, the quality standard has gone up. But the flip side of things is we can still make more money today than we did 8 years ago because of the things we have learned about efficiency, production, fertility, and things like that. So prices definitely have changed. There is a lot more available in organic than there has ever been before. But what we try and stay apart from the competition is quality, and quality. And I think for the big chains to operate, price is number one. It's quality, and then it's service, and then it's price. So if you can be committed to having it every week for this amount of weeks, they want to do business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and you see it especially in dairy right now, when there is plenty of supply, the quality standards tend to go up, but the price doesn't.
Exactly.
Because they can pick and choose what they want because they've got different people they can go to for the same product. But I just know that for the Organic Farming Conference, which I'm on the planning committee for, when we had the field day a couple of years ago, and most of the vegetables have come from Greenfield Farms, and it was the nicest broccoli and the nicest cauliflower I had ever seen, and it was organic. And that's what impresses me, is when you see stuff that is absolutely picture perfect and it's grown organically. And so Greenfield Farms has a great reputation on high quality produce. It's great.
Yes, and that's what we hear at every meeting is quality, and that's our growers. They work together. They share what they know, how to produce this, and that definitely sets it apart from just mainstream organic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know one thing that has been a bit of a barrier in the last 3 years has been some of the new federal regulations. I'm not going to remember the name that they gave to it, that food companies had to, whether it was the producer or the manufacturer or the processor, and is it GAP? Am I remembering that right?
There is a GAPS training, correct. And that's called Good Agricultural Practices.
Yeah.
Is that for Whole Foods you have to be GAP certified on? I know on animals you do.
I think that's something different. There was federal regulations that in the last, because I know that our own produce program through Organic Valley was really helping to help out and basically consolidate some of this extra paperwork that was going along with these updated and more stringent federal regulations. Have you run into any of those barriers, and is Greenfield Farms or whoever helping out their growers to make sure you're up to standards and not have to raise your costs because of having to meet certain guidelines that have been now required?
That is a big thing, and that's actually part of marketing anymore. Mm-hmm. What is your food safety standard? And I think the new law you were trying to talk about is FSMA.
FSMA, yes. Yep.
That was signed into law here a couple of years ago, and it's just there's a couple different tiers, and depending where you are, what you have to come up to. But For us, that's definitely part of the program, and it's not something a farmer wants to be. He likes to grow his crops and forget about the rest. But there is a paper trail. We do a 7-hour GAPS training every year, even though if you've been there a couple times, you know what's going to happen, but that's a requirement, and I can sacrifice a day to stay in the marketplace. And then we also have to pass a third-party audit. And I assume that runs close to what you guys do with animal care standards on the dairy side. Mm-hmm. But for us, we need to we get an inspection once a year for that, and before we're able to send any produce, we have to have that. We have to have a water sample that has 0 E. coli or total coliforms in it, and like for the third party audit. Every crop we grow, we have a written standard operating procedure. We have a farm plan in place. So there's things we do that Dad never did and Grandpa never did, but I think sooner we accept it, that is probably the only way we will stay profitable in the business.
Yeah, and that's... It's not produce, it's not dairy, it's everything. You know, the standards are being raised, and like you said, in order to stay in the marketplace, farmers just have to be, it's easy for me to say farmers have to be willing to accept that because I'm not the one that has to deal with the paperwork and the inspections, but it is the reality. That
it is, and consumers are who is paying my farm, and if that's what they want, that's what I want to provide.
Mm-hmm. And if you're not willing to provide what that consumer wants, somebody else will.
Exactly.
And, you know, they say the customer's always right. Well, when you look at what the demands are from the animal care to, you said FSMA?
Yes.
You know, when you look at that, the consumer wants that because they want to be sure that they're eating something that's grown ethically and environmentally friendly and healthy.
Yes.
So it's a part of the world that we now live in, and if you don't accept it, there's a ton of other people that will.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just part of farming, and you think you can't. It looks pretty daunting at first, but once you get with the program, it's not that hard, really. You can do it.
I think it's probably a little bit like getting certified for the first time. When you look at that first time you fill out that application, because I certified my land because, you know, with my job I was telling farmers that, oh, it's not that bad. Well, I was never certified, so I certified my fields. Yeah. It was daunting when you looked at that stack of paperwork at first, but once you had it completed and you had a plan, it's really not that hard. It's just you have to, you know, I think it's easier for the younger generation to make that move because things have changed so drastically in the last 15 years, where the older generation that never had to do any of it, it's a lot harder for them to now do that. So I think that's why when you look at the younger generation, you know, your age, you know, late 20s, 30s, the switch to organics makes sense because even the non-organic, the paper trail that they need in conventional agriculture is there as well. So the switch to organics isn't as daunting.
And I know young farmers that they're just waiting for the chance to be able to be with the organic dairy market. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, if you're willing to do something, you're usually able to do it too. Versus I just don't want to do this, it's a lot harder. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the beauties of our community is I might not have done this myself, but my neighbor might have, and he's willing to help me.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what's so wonderful about, and it's not just the community here in Holmes County, it's lots of other communities in the world, but in agriculture, when somebody finds something that really works good, it's not a trade secret that they found a niche in the marketplace like a manufacturing company. It's not a secret. If something works for a farmer, he wants to tell every farmer he knows. And I think the support that's there for mentoring young farmers and to help is the key to the success of the community.
It is. And farmers, they're just not good good at keeping secrets. If they happen to be successful at something, they really like to tell people about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when they try something and it doesn't work, they also say that product does not work.
Exactly.
Did you have, when you first started here on produce, did you have produce guys, because you didn't grow up with it, did you have produce guys that you used as mentors or that helped you make the decisions on how to dip your toe in the pool?
My biggest mentor at that time was Raymond Yoder. He was instrumental in starting the Greenfield Farms Co-op, and he's still a board member, and he was also with the Farmers Produce Auction. And so I would run up to him before we moved here. We live close by, and ask tips and so forth. But after we moved, he showed up about once or twice a summer, and that was a lot of support, just seeing somebody that knew what he was seeing. But as far as locally, there was nobody around that knew anything about it. And the co-op was so small at that time, there was no field man hired. So there was a lot of things learned the hard way. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things as the co-op has grown to, I don't know, maybe we have 100 produce farmers right now or so. And the past year, I think produce sales were 5.5 million or so. And as it's growing, and as I think about the things that we had to learn the hard way on our own, it just makes me willing, if somebody is humble enough to ask for help, to share what we know.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes the best help and the best mentorship comes from somebody who had to figure it out on their own, because it's probably very vivid, the struggles that you had, and you want to try to help somebody, what not to do.
Exactly. I don't like to see somebody struggle. I don't like to see somebody start. And when a new farmer comes to me and asks how to get started, I tell him what I know, but I also give him the warning, this is not easy. And then you just have to look away, because in any farming, 3 to 5 years it takes till you have your footing, and that 3 to 5 years just has to happen. Nobody can give that to you.
Mm-hmm. And I think, one of the things in talking to, we've had several other young farmers that had started up in whether it was dairy or produce, that had very limited experience in that field. And one of the fun things to see is that you don't come from you don't have ingrained habits from being raised growing produce or dairying or cropping a certain way. You're coming in with fresh ideas, and you can start trying a few new things, and you might eventually have people coming to you and asking questions, or you might have the opportunity to do something a little bit different that maybe somebody else didn't look at before. And that's one thing we talked with Jonathan Yoder from Northern Indiana, and he's doing some pretty neat things because he didn't grow up on a dairy. He didn't grow up learning this is how it's done and this is how it will always be done. He came in green and asking questions, and then figured it out on his own.
I think that's one of the opportunities a non-farmer has. Going in, you're not, for all the experience you gain growing up on a farm, it can be a huge benefit. But also, if you don't have that experience, for us, we didn't know anything about growing produce. We didn't have anything to draw off of, so we just had to think, well, what works best for us, mm-hmm. and then that's what we had to do. So that's definitely an opportunity if you want to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It may not seem like it when you're in the middle of having a poor crop and you're wondering how in the world the grocery bill is going to get paid, but it does wind up being a benefit in the end.
Yep, even if it was painful
mm-hmm.
to go
mm-hmm.
through.
I think, I've got two brother-in-laws who did not grow up on a farm, period, and who are both dairy farmers now. So they had no background, any idea of conventional agriculture. So when they started farming, it was organic. So that's the only way they knew how to farm. So they didn't know about the treatments that you could use for calves and this and that. So it was almost less of a learning curve for them to be organic farmers because they weren't conventional farmers before.
They could start on something new. They didn't have to forget the old.
So do you have anything looking, in 5 years down the road? Are you looking at expanding your acres of produce, or are you kind of happy with where you are? Do you want to have a little less work, or do you have a kind of a vision where you want to go with this?
Well, I better have a vision if I don't. As we read in Proverbs, I think, where there is no vision, the people perish. But I do have a vision. It's not a clear-cut vision, and it changes with time. But where we're at right now, and maybe I should review where we've been to say where we want to go. But so we started with 2 acres, and then we went to 4, and then 8, and then 12, and then 20, and then back to 14, I think. And what we've learned is the past couple of years, if we take better care of what we're doing on 12 or 14, we can have as much left at the end of the year as we had when we grew 20. So it's really what our goal is not to get bigger, but it is to get better. And there's a new book out, well, not brand new anymore. It's been around for a little bit, but The Lean Farm by Ben Hartman. And he was just learning to do things better. And so that's the process we're going through, trying to look at what we're doing, step back, what can I do to eliminate a couple moves and just do it better. And it's amazing what you can do if you look at it that way. So the long-term goal is not more acres farming, really, just more efficient, more productive. And then, we try and fit our season with our seasonal help, have work from the end of May till September or so. And we're not at this point looking at winter crops, things like that. We like our break, but that can change. And what I really like is my longest term vision is I see farmers retire at 55 and then they have another 20-year career in a wood shop or something like that. And that is not me unless I change my mind. So what I really would like to see is grow our retail to that level that when the time comes to step aside for the younger generation, that maybe I could keep in the retail end of the things to keep bread on the table.
Mm-hmm. That's really a neat way. I like that vision a lot, because when you read books or articles about business, it's always growth. Or I shouldn't say always, but majority of the time it is bigger, bigger, bigger. And to hear you say, back up off the acres a little bit, but be more efficient, be better at what you're doing, the profitability is the same as bigger, but not better. So that's a really neat vision. I like it a lot.
I know in business they say if you're not growing, you're decreasing, and I can understand that from a business perspective. But for us personally, and as the community grows, there's less acres available per person, and I think it's time we learn how to do a lot of things with a little amount of acres. I think there's a lot of opportunities that we haven't gone to yet. That we can do with a small amount of acreage. And one inspiration I have is a brother-in-law on, he grows about 1.5 acres of produce, and there's maybe 4 or 5 high tunnels. And he really doesn't have a nice piece of ground to do it, but he does it, and he's living debt-free, and with that, for his income, half of the year, the other half he works at Berlin Seeds Company, and he's just showing me that you can do things on a very small scale.
Mm-hmm. I think being better managers of the acreages that you have, I think Well, just look at dairy. I think there's a lot of yield potential and milk potential left on the table, simply because, well, you've got plenty of acres for your 35 cows. So I think every farmer, well, not just farmers, everybody can get better and more efficient at what they're doing.
Yes, I think so too.
And also, part of the model, like you said, with growth is the typical business model. And part of what suffers when you have that kind of growth can be quality. So if you're focused on getting more production out of the ground you have, the quality will come with it. Versus, if you expand, at some point there will reach a point where there either is not enough quality help, or your limits have been reached on the amount of care you can give to the ground that you have. And I think you kind of mentioned that with going from 20 acres back to 14, and that might be where that limit was reached, that you just felt that quality was diminishing because you had taken on too much.
Yes, we had in that 20 acre year. And I realize that's not a lot of acres compared to a big farm, but for me, I was the only manager, and I didn't reach around, and nobody else did either. And the romance of farming disappears quickly when you're overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And I just think we need to be examples of doing more with less, to be an inspiration to the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think every farm needs to find that sweet spot, whether it be cow numbers or crop acres, or with your acreages here. You had to do the 20 acres in order to realize that the 14 number is better. If you would have stayed at 14, that 20 acres would still be in your head thinking, that might be the one.
Yep, that would be better. I could make, 14 and go to 20. What percent increase is that? I could be doing a lot better. But and there would be a way to manage 20 acres profitably. I mean, very profitably. If you had, for me, no children around, there's no incentive to grow this for a father and two sons or so forth. So as a single manager, 20 is just not a good number for me.
Quality of life is important too.
That's right. Sometimes you got to sit down and drink coffee too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm really glad you took the time to sit down with us. This was a really kind of an inspiring visit with you. So really interesting and intriguing, because I know very little about produce, just what we have in our garden. So I learned a lot. So really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us.
Well, you're welcome. I enjoyed it.